Hello everybody, welcome to the Circuit of Barcelona, Catalunya, for the final race of the 2015 Radical European Masters. Already the Fangio class has been decided in favour of Alain Costa, the Masters class in favour of Ross Kaiser and Terence Woodward, but the Supersport class is still up for grabs in this final race of the season. To talk you through the action, it is Will Brown from Radical Sports Cars, myself, Ben Evans, and lining up in pole position it is Paddy McGluhan. He and Victor Crair finally having luck going in their favour in the race that we had earlier on today.
Yeah, finally they managed to score a victory. In McLuhan's case, it was a maiden victory for him. Yeah, still very tightly poised in the points.
It certainly is. They share the front row then with Alain Costa and Johan Scheer. And then on to row 2, Terence Woodward and Ross Kaiser, champions. And it is going to be Woodward who will be taking to the start. Now, this is the car that leads the Supersport class, that of Marcello Maracchiotto and Marco Ciancetti. Now, basically, they need to finish in the top 5 in the Supersport class in order to claim the crown, and that is if Bradley Ellis and Andy Cummings win the Supersport class. And it's going to be Bradley Ellis who will be starting, the former British GT champion.
Yeah, and there's 15 seconds in terms of success seconds difference between them, so a little bit longer in the pit stops for Maracchiotto and Ciancetti. It's a case for Maracchiotto will have to do everything he can and really dig into the reserves to build out a buffer ahead of his handover.
There's Pete Belshaw, who will line up in 7th place, and Pete, who making a very welcome return to Radical competition this weekend. Starting from 8th is going to be Ollie Hancock, and Ollie, who's been sharing with Mark Hignett. And Ollie, I think, will be hoping to be in contention, I would suggest, for Supersport honours early on. We've got then a gap back on the grid where James Winslow should have been at 9th on the grid. And so Winslow not there. In 10th place, we have got John Caldwell as the crowd preparing for their final dose of motorsport action for the 2015 season. This is the grid in full then. Paddy McGluhan and Alain Costa on the front row, then Terence Woodward and Marcello Maracchiotto row 2, Bradley Ellis and Andrew Ferguson row 3 from Pete Belshaw and Ollie Hancock. James Winslow not there in 9th, so John Caldwell all alone on the 5th row, just clear of James Swift and Jean Gander. Then Jaap Bartels and Marcus Johnson on the 7th row from Ozzy Yusuf and Ricardo Dona, and James Abbott, suspect, will probably be starting from the pit lane. And the driver who has had the least luck so far, Will, has been James Swift. He's been in a leading position twice and DNF'd twice.
Yeah, you might be a little bit surprised to find him so far by the back, towards the back, but of course this racing grid is determined by the race 2 finishing positions, and as you just alluded to, in race 2 he had a pretty commanding lead and looked to be comfortably sort of controlling the race before a suspension problem sidelined him, and he had similar luck in the first race, unfortunately retiring in the pit stops.
So we've got an hour of action to look forward to. That would rather suggest that James Abbott won't be starting from the pit lane.
Yeah, I understand that the Radical Works team have obviously been fielding that RXC Turbo for development use, and they've been delighted with the performance over the weekend, so it's been put to bed. So mission accomplished, I think.
Excellent. So 60 minutes of action to look forward to. There is, of course, the mandatory pit window that comes between the 20 and 40 minute mark in the race. As the grid is being cleared, they'll then have a final green flag formation lap before they go racing for the last time this season, unless you count the dash to the airport this evening. So the cars about to be released onto the green flag formation lap. I think that is unlikely to get to a second date, as they are poised ready for the green flag, which they get now. So this will be the last opportunity to see how the track conditions have changed since the race first thing this morning.
Yeah, still quite a strong breeze, and this morning's race was had quite a strong tailwind, and again they've got that, although it has eased just a little bit. But I would think the lap times will be a little bit slower this afternoon with the track temperature being a little bit higher.
As the opportunity just to get a little bit of heat into the tyres. In fact, the breeze is as stiff as it has been at any stage during the day, which just adds that extra element of challenge. So how can we expect to see the race unfolding? Well, the success seconds always have a big bearing on things, but because actually nobody has had a particularly meteoric weekend, it means that when it all plays out, none of the gaps you'd suggest are particularly insurmountable. So that could be quite interesting. The only combination who do have a very lengthy pit stop are Maratiotto and Marco Cencetti.
Yeah, which is somewhat ironic considering they are the only team here at the moment left to contest a championship position. But yeah, everybody else is broadly speaking feeling the a pit stop in the range between 65 and 90 seconds. So I think it's going to be a really close run thing, and perhaps we'll see some teams take some big gambles as well in terms of strategy with the championship now off the cards.
Well, what we did see in the race earlier on today is that trying to stretch the SR8 for the whole race on a single tank of fuel without topping it up wasn't quite possible. James Winslow eventually running dry a lap and a half short of the checkered flag, although you'd have to say if we were to see the intervention of a safety car, then that suddenly starts to become a very viable option.
Yeah, and of course that car was with James Winslow and Corbett in it, and Corbett had to put Winslow rather had to defend a lot from Ross Kaiser in the middle stage of the race, which I'm sure won't have helped his fuel consumption one bit. So with them running out on the final lap, maybe there'll be a couple of teams that will take a gamble here.
I think they're going to start from the pit lane, the Jack White Racing squad, and therefore saving the fuel of doing the formation lap.
Well, it's a brave strategy, but
the installation lap to the grid. I'm just looking out. Yeah, there is certainly a radical shaped car at the far end of the pit lane, and from ninth on the grid, clearly they feel that it's not worth the benefit that they get by being mid-pack into turn one. So clearly they've rerun the numbers and have identified the lap time that they need to circulate at.
Yeah, and they're running a fairly modest 10 extra seconds of success seconds. So it's only a 75-second overall pit time for them. So they're looking pretty good on that as well.
Through turn 11 then, on this formation lap, it's the orange car of Paddy McGluen who paces the field. Alongside him is Alain Costa. And I think there's many in the Radical paddock who would really like to see Alain Costa coming out of this weekend with a race win. He's had his career best results in the first couple of races, but the effect of that, of course, means that he's actually accumulated quite a degree of success seconds with additional 20 or so over his main rivals. So now it is McLuhan who doesn't quite yet have the responsibility of pacing the field, but the pace car about to peel off, which it does now. For the final time this season, we've got 60 minutes of action for the Radical European Masters about to get underway as the red lights are about to change. And away we go. And who's got the jump from the line? Again, they fan out in the midfield as they sprint towards turn one. It's Terence Woodward who's got the jump and somehow been able to squeeze between the leading pair, and he's going to be leading into the first corner. So Terence Woodward has the advantage, although McLuhan snatches the brakes. So it's Woodward from McLuhan and Costa, and then we have got Ferguson next along from Bradley Ellis. So Marcello Maratiotto dropping back down the field just a little bit. So everybody cleanly through the first couple of turns and climbing uphill through turn 3.
Yeah, Woodward judged that launch to perfection, didn't he? And was almost alongside McLuhan before he'd even crossed the start line. So that was a really brilliantly judged start, and a great first lap for him. That's Peter Belshaw skipping across the gravel. Can he keep it? Yeah, looks like he's going to have a rejoin, but that won't have. He's going to be rejoining somewhere down the order.
Oh, Bradley Ellis is already up into third place, doing battle with Alain Costa. And they've also got Ollie Hancock just behind them as well in the late afternoon autumnal sunshine. Now, a driver who's lost out a little bit through turn 3 was possibly that of Andrew Ferguson. He has slipped back just a little bit as already Paddy McLuhan is up back ahead of Terence Woodward. So McLuhan takes the lead, and clearly Paddy McLuhan knows he needs to lead this out from the front as a little bit of a challenge being launched. That is James Swift to the inside, gaining another place to turn 10, and Swift needs a good first lap. He's up ahead of Bradley Ellis. His next target is Alain Costa. There is Marcello Maracchiotto. He has dropped down into 10th place, but again, I don't think that's going to unduly concern him. So there's this queue of cars beginning to form behind Alain Costa. There's Ozzy Yusuf, then Maracchiotto, then Ricardo Dona, Cordwell and Johnson. Peter Belshaw's recovered, and in fact, he's recovered in front of Jean Gandar. Here's another look then at the move from McLuhan. Brave stuff. Assertive defence, or at least assertive attempted defence from Terence Woodward.
Yeah, it was a rapidly closing gap there, but McLuhan held his nerve and held on to the place. As it looks like Swift finally managed to battle his way past, and he's now up above Costa as well. So that's third place for Swift.
And this is really what James Swift needs to do, is get himself up to the front of the field as quickly as possible. I can't imagine that Terence Woodward is going to massively delay his 360 Racing teammate. And that is the next target for James Swift. As McLuhan already begins to stretch his legs, some 2 seconds clear of Woodward in the Supersport class. Bradley Ellis leads it from Ollie Hancock, and now Ricardo Dona, who has clambered up ahead of Marcello Maracchiotto. And Dona, who didn't even get to drive the car in race 2 after collision between John Corbett and Ozzy Yusuf.
Yeah, Maracchiotto can't really afford to drop any more places in the Supersports class. Really, he needs to keep a fairly consistent head and just hold his nerve there. And if he can stay on the back of Dona, I think once he hands over to Capadia, that'll maybe. Oh, and a bit of contact there. That was
a brave move from James Swift, who looked to the inside of Terence Woodward, and just as I was saying that Woodward wouldn't make it too difficult for him, he shut the door in his face, and very nearly contact between the two teammates, who would probably have had to have pushed the team truck home if they're coming together.
Yeah, it'd be fair to say there doesn't look like there's too many team orders there in the 360 Racing camp at the moment, and Swift has a look there, and Woodward shuts the door straight back on him.
The pair of them come out of the final turn on to the conclusion of lap 2, and all the while, of course, they are losing ground to Paddy McLuhan. He's now 4.4 seconds clear. As just showing himself to the inside of Woodward is James Swift. Meanwhile, a good challenge being launched by Ozzy Yusuf, who looks to the inside of Bradley Ellis. Ellis brakes desperately late, and then even a little bit later than that, to make sure that he keeps his SR3 ahead of the SR8 of Ozzy Yusuf. Because Bradley Ellis knows that, given the relative pace of Marco Cencetti late on, that he needs to build a massive advantage over Marcello Maracchiotto in these early stages to give a defensible buffer for Andy Cummings.
Yeah, and with these driver declarations and the starting drivers having been made in secret, then it must have been a bit of a surprise to find those two out together at the same time. But yeah, as you say, really, you need to make hay while the sun shines and build a pretty commanding lead to hand over to Andy.
So the two 360 Racing cars running in tandem. Second and third place, Terence Woodward and James Swift, and Woodward is not at all inclined, is he, to make this easy for James Swift. But again, Woodward would like to finish the season on a high, but Swift launches to the inside, and this time the space is there, and Woodward unable to defend until well after Swift has gone through. But of course, Woodward wants to keep Swift in touch so as not to make the task too difficult for Ross Kaiser in the second half of the race. Into the chicane, and now how quickly, of course, can Swift get onto terms with Paddy McLuhan? That's going to be the big question. All the while they're easing away from Alain Costa, who's got his mirrors full of Jaap Bartels, then Ozzy Yusuf, and this is a good opening to the race for Jaap Bartels. It's a real pity actually that he spun out of the race earlier on this morning, because the Spider was starting to look really hooked up. Yeah,
pace looking very good at the moment, lapping in the mid 151s, and that's some half a second faster than Costa is indeed now. But he's really going to have to he's going to have to watch his mirrors now, because Yusuf's catching up pretty quickly as well, and right on his tail into that braking zone.
But it's through turn 3 really where Bartels can take advantage of the traction of the Spider. There is Andrew Ferguson in 9th place, clear of Ricardo Dona in 10th. Then Maracchiotto in 11th, but for how long? Because he's got James Winslow homing in on his tail. Now my guess is that the Jack White Racing team for James Winslow and John Corbett have sat down and worked out a specific lap time that they need to run at.
Yeah, so Winslow certainly isn't carving his way up through the field quite as fast as you might expect from an Asian and an Australian Formula 3 race winner. But yeah, they're a vastly experienced team led by Derek White, a former Works team technical engineer himself. So I'm sure they've done a lot of calculations and with pinpoint accuracy, hopefully this time got the fuel consumption correct.
Well, it would be quite the achievement if they could do it on the single tank of fuel, but they didn't do an installation lap, they didn't do a formation lap, so that's 2 tours of the circuit they've saved, albeit not at race pace for James Winslow, but even so he just needs to keep things at a level thereafter.
All the while we see this continuing cat and mouse game here between Costa Bartels and Youssef, and it looks like Youssef manages to catch up through the middle, more twisty section of the circuit before the Spider can pull away from him again.
Now this is quite interesting because this gaggle of cars, they don't really want to fight too much because Paddy McLuhan in the lead of the race is now 13 seconds clear of Alain Costa, and this is always the difficulty, isn't it, in the first half of these Radical European Masters races. You want to fight for track position, but if your rival starts defending, you actually just lose ground to the leaders.
Yeah, really, they need to sort of work in partnership and just ease off the attacking and defending for a bit, and hopefully that train will then catch up to the back of the 2 360 racing cars in front of them.
So we've got just 8 minutes of the race completed. Paddy McLuhan leads it, 5.3 seconds clear of James Swift, but Swift last time around was half a second quicker than McLuhan. Third place Terence Woodward, fourth is Alain Costa, fifth is Jack Bartels, sixth Aussie Youssef. We're watching that fight for fourth, fifth and sixth. Seventh place is Bradley Ellis, he leads the Supersport class from in eighth place. Ollie Hancock, and then Ricardo Donor is the third Supersport car, and he is currently in 10th. Jack Bartels picks the throttle up, coming out of turn 8, uphill towards turn 9. And he's not under particular threat at all, is he, through this middle sector on the lap from Aussie Youssef? It's only really as they head to the braking zone for turn 1 that Youssef starts to get onto terms.
Yeah, it sort of shows the relative difference in the handling merits and the nature of the cars. Obviously, the Spider is that little bit bigger and a little bit heavier, but you've got a kind of an overall more aerodynamically stable package, and the weight distribution is slightly superior to the SR8. You know, it's a slightly certainly the SR8 is that little bit more lively in the way that it moves around. It's a slightly older design of car, but what the guys have found that have driven the Spider this year is that it is a more stable and an easier car to drive over the whole race distance. And of course they've got that fuel advantage as well, that they won't need to refuel.
They certainly do. Now what's really interesting is Jack Bartels, that last lap was a 1 minute 50.7. Now James Winslow is having to run an identical lap time to conserve fuel. So that could be really interesting later on once Stuart Mosley gets in the car from Jack Bartels, and we could well see the Spider challenging for victory in this final race of the year.
Yeah, well, all the teams that need to refuel, they'll then have to take an extra 30 seconds mandatorily in their pit stops, as effectively that's a safety buffer to ensure that the refueling is carried out correctly. So that's really going to hit these front-running SR8 drivers.
Certainly is, as now Jack Bartels beginning to ask a couple of questions of Alain Costa. And I think where the Spider is just really strong is that it's a consistently menacing presence. Because of that stability, you can get that stability from the SR8, but at the cost of a higher level of tyre degradation.
And physical degradation as well, because with the Spider you've got the benefit of power steering, the bigger brakes. It's a more less physically demanding car to drive. So from a driver's point of view, it's much easier to sustain, particularly as a solo driver, to sustain the performance over a whole race distance.
At the front of the field, meanwhile, James Swift is now within 3.3 seconds of Paddy McLuhan, having set another fastest lap of the race, as the fight for fourth winds its way through the somewhat sinuous final sector on the lap at the Circuits Catalunya. But yeah, Jack Bartels really is now getting right up behind Alain Costa, trying to pressurise the mistake from Alain. He's also eased clear of Aussie Youssef. I just wonder if Youssef, having picked up that suspension damage early on, if the tracking maybe isn't just quite to his liking, because of course the teams do a great job of repairing and aligning the cars at the circuit. It's never quite the same as a workshop ready car, and Youssef struggling to stay with this fight.
Yeah, you can really see that Bartels has got the bit between his teeth now, though, and He's really close back up to the tail of Costa now. He's just 6/10 adrift.
Meanwhile, McLuhan and Swift, first to second. That battle continues to close up in the Supersport class. Ellis leads from Hancock and Donor. Ricardo Donor now has been passed by James Winslow. And Winslow's last lap of 1 minute 48.6, which is pretty rapid, isn't it? If you're
well, it's faster than everybody bar Swift on the circuit at the moment. Everybody in front of him is lapping in the 150s, 151s. So yeah, this is going to be certainly an interesting run all the way to the pit stops in just over 15 minutes time.
Well, I'll tell you what, the Jack White team will have
15 minutes, rather 7 minutes.
Yeah, the Jack White team will have plenty of raconteurs if they do make it to the checkered flag without the need to put some fuel in. But whether or not it's going to pay off in terms of an overall result, I think it's going to be quite interesting, as the fight for fourth remains much as it was. But I completely agree with you, Will, that it's about the physical degradation and the tyre degradation for Alain Costa to sustain that level of corner speed, lap upon lap with Jack Bartels closing on him, is just going to be really tricky.
Yeah, that's right, because your driving becomes unnatural. You're driving offline to defend, and everything just becomes more work than you'd be used to. Oh, I'm just wondering if there's a mistake there briefly by Bartels. He doesn't seem to have got quite as good a run out of that final corner as he did on the previous lap.
He committed quite deeply, didn't he, to harrying Alain Costa into the final sequence, but it gives Costa the opportunity to get that superior exit speed, and if Alain Costa just focuses on that, it's going to be very hard for Jack Bartels to find a way past him. Well, the good news is this isn't quite your final bout of radical racing for 2015, because the very exciting news announced earlier this week, of course, is that the SR3 RSX will be in action at the Race of Champions.
Yeah, so the very same SR3 RSX models that you see racing here at Barcelona will also be out in action at the former Olympic Stadium in Wembley in just under 3 weeks' time now, as part of the world famous Race of Champions. So it's a fantastically exciting event that we're involved with for the first time, and yeah, really looking forward to all those great stars of 2- and 4-wheeled racing getting involved in these cars.
We await with interest the announcement that Daniel Ricciardo's chucked it in Formula 1 to come and race in the Radical European Masters next year, as this is the battle at the front of the field, because Paddy McLuhan is being caught now by James Swift. Well, he's been caught for several laps, but now Swift is getting right onto terms with him. We are 5.5 minutes away from the opening of the pit window, although what we have seen in both of the preceding races is that McLuhan and Correa have had exactly half of the race each, and that James Swift has tended to leave it until pretty late in the pit window before making his stop, and therefore this battle could potentially run for another 15, if not more, minutes. Again, Swift 8/10 quicker than Paddy McLuhan last time through, but he's now getting into that turbulent air behind the car of McLuhan, and this is where, as long as McLuhan just focuses on the fundamentals, then Swift may struggle to find a way through.
Yeah, it's one thing to catch up to the back of these SR8s, but with their huge aerodynamic grip, they produce quite a generous weight behind them, and that can be incredibly difficult to break out of and pass, because of course the cars are so closely matched in terms of specification and performance.
You can drive through that wake, but you really start experiencing, first of all, lots of understeer, but secondly, you're asking far more of your tyres than you really want to.
And brake temperatures as well, because the air behind is so turbulent, you're not getting the same cooling through the brakes, and that can make a big difference, surprisingly so.
But for McLuhan, what he needs to make sure he does is just, if you focus on the exit speeds, it doesn't matter to an extent how slowly you go through some of the corners. As long as you get the exit speed right, then the car behind will always struggle to find a way past.
And this is one of the things that makes Barcelona such a fantastic and really popular round for these radical races, is that fast and flowing nature. You've just got to be smooth, and it's undoubtedly the fastest and the best way to drive these cars. And they really are at their absolute peak around a circuit like this.
It's a circuit which offers a myriad of challenges to both the drivers and also engineers. It's a little bit like the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, and it's a circuit where it's very difficult to establish a perfect setup, because there are so many different characteristics that you want a reasonably low level of wing for the very long front straight, but then you need that aerodynamic grip on other sections of the circuit.
Yeah, and we've seen a few times this weekend that the cars have sort of tended to slightly understeer and wash out a little bit on the long uphill run of the first half of the course, and that of course is a payoff for the straight line speed that you get with a low wing and low downforce setting.
And now James Swift, he's about 3/4 of a second back from Paddy McLuhan. His progress thereafter is going to be a little bit more challenging, but at the same time, the pair of them running in tandem at such a pace that they are still pulling away from Terence Woodward in third place, Alain Costa in fourth, Bartels in fifth. Bartels and Costa actually have cleared a little bit of ground behind them before you get to Ozzy Yusuf, and then James Winslow has climbed up into seventh. The Supersport class, that is Bradley Ellis from Ollie Hancock and Ricardo Dona. Marcello Marchiotto currently fourth in the Supersport class, so he's doing exactly what he needs to be Supersport champion.
Yeah, and at the moment there's a just under 30-second split from Ellis back to Marchiotto, and of course Marchiotto will be carrying an extra 15 seconds within the pit stops over Ellis and Cummins. So I can see this is going to go all the way down to the very, very final dying moments of this race.
Gives Marco Ciancetti quite the exam question, doesn't it? The pit window opens in 2.25 minutes, but they can only pit in once they have been past the pit lane open board. So what that really means is the pit window is from 38 minutes remaining until 18 minutes remaining is the window where we'd see the cars stopping. Now we can expect to see Marchiotto in straight away. We can expect to see Bradley Ellis in at the very, very last second. That the rest of them, it comes down to some strategic decisions. I'd anticipate that the two cars we're watching in the fight for the lead, they'll leave it till quite late in the pit window, but then Alain Costa and Jaap Bartels and Terence Woodward, so the cars in third, fourth and fifth, they'll all be in quite early.
Yeah, McLuhan and Correa were pretty closely matched in terms of lap times this morning, but I sense that perhaps McLuhan was a little bit easier on the tyres than Correa was through certainly today's race. So if the team are looking really to make it to the finish with a strong, I think they'll perhaps leave him out a little bit longer, particularly if it's
there was a mistake from McLuhan through turn 3, and that gives the opening for James Swift, and shows if you sit behind the car in front for long enough, you pressurise them for long enough, you can force the error, and McLuhan just washed out wide at turn 3, and that gave the opening for Swift to dart through. Yeah,
and already it seems to be pulling a little bit of air. There's certainly he's got that extra couple of kph over McLuhan. It looks like he's being held up, although McLuhan again just closing up for a second.
Well, Paddy McLuhan's now got the benefit a little bit of the slipstream from car James Swift, and also more importantly, you can actually watch what Swift is doing and match his driving to that, because it's generally speaking a lot easier to follow than it is to lead when you're in a group of cars, because when you're following you can analyse what the car in front is doing, match the good bits, think of improvements on where you know you're a little bit stronger, and then group for another challenge. But actually through this middle phase of the lap, that's where Swift has been appreciably quicker than McLuhan. He's already opened up, I'd say, about 3/4 of a second worth of a lead.
Yeah, I mean, it's still been a deeply impressive debut this season for Paddy McLuhan to come into the European Masters for the first time. He narrowly missed out on the Radical Sprint Championship title this year, just losing out to Ben Dimmock by a couple of points. But he's jumped straight into the SR8 and really acquainted himself well, certainly in this final round.
They head past the pit board, which says the pit window is now open. So from the end of this lap, they can look to duck in and make their mandatory pit stops, and we will probably see a flurry of cars coming in at the end of lap 12, particularly those that have got their pro driver to take over for the final 40 minutes or so of the race. Just looking down into the pit lane, there are a few teams readying themselves. McLuhan attempts to stay with the race leader James Swift. So at 1/3 distance is James Swift who leads. Second place is Paddy McLuhan. Third is Terence Woodward. Fourth, Alain Costa. Fifth, Jaap Bartels. Sixth, James Winslow. Seventh, Ozzy Yusuf. Eighth, and in the Supersport class, is Bradley Ellis from ninth, Ollie Hancock. 10th, Andrew Ferguson. 11th, Ricardo Dona. 12th, Marcello Marchiotto. 13th is Peter Belshaw. In 13th place is Marcus Johnson. And in 14th place rather Johnson, and 15th place is John Caldwell. That is...
Yeah, of course, all these cars have got to complete a lap before they can come into pits. They have to pass the physically pass the pit open board before they can come in to serve the pit stops. That balances up the teams that have radios and those that don't.
Now, are we going to be seeing McLuhan ducking on this occasion? I think that's probably unlikely, particularly as they're no longer in contention for the championship. The seat time almost takes precedence for Paddy McLuhan, certainly with an eye towards next year's campaign. So he follows James Swift across the line. He's 1.7 seconds adrift of Swift. We then have a long wait for Terence Woodward, who I think will be expecting into the pit lane on this occasion. Indeed, here he comes now. So Woodward brings the car down to the pit lane speed limit, and our understanding is that the 360 Racing team are not going to take any chances here and will just top the car up with a little bit of fuel.
And why would they need to? The overall championships in the bags, they're now double European champions and a former UK Cup Championship team as well. So plenty of time to just reflect there and go out for one last roll of the dice.
And they've got every opportunity of getting onto the podium. Also into the pit lane is Andrew Ferguson. That is to hand over to Jeremy Ferguson. And those are the only 2 pit stops that we have had.
Now the big question is, how soon is it going to be before we see the 29 car of Matriotto entering the pits?
Well, interestingly, he didn't come in on that last lap, and I'd rather thought that he might have done, but it could equally be that the championship is more or less in the bag for Matriotto and Cenchetti, so Marcello is deciding to award himself a few final laps of glory for this season before he comes into the pit lane. Well, for James Swift, the pit stop's been his nemesis. Yes, they never emerged from them. Today, in the earlier race, the car failed on his outlap. McLuhan and Swift completing their 13th lap. The gap between the pair of them hovering at just about 2 seconds. 1.9 seconds to be precise. On the brakes towards first turn. McLuhan just balancing the throttle. It's up to turn 3. This is one of the most challenging corners here in every sense, putting massive lateral G-forces through the drivers. Now into the pit lane comes Alain Costa. That is to hand over to Johan Scheer.
Yeah, they've Costa's really developed as a driver through this year. Interestingly, though, no fuel there going into the car as Johan hops into the seat. So looks like this pairing are going all the way on that tank. So
the maths has been done, and they clearly feel that the fuel economy is to be had. And the reason why we're making such a big deal of this is because if you refuel the car, it's an additional 30 seconds on your pit stop time. So clearly they're taking the gamble that if they can manage the fuel through to the end of the race, that's going to be worth it. Also into the pit lane is Ricardo Dona to hand over to Alex Capadia, as is Marcello Maratteotto to pass on to Marco Cenchetti, the leading brace of cars, circulating in tandem at the front of the field. And Paddy McLuhan, like many young drivers, very early on in his career, making the switch across to sports car racing, because actually, for a young driver looking to make their way in motorsport, that's really the best opportunity to build a career from it.
And following in his father's footsteps, Paul McLuhan, his father, erstwhile SR3 racer, formerly in the Radical UK and before that Clubman's Cup as well. So yeah, great to have the young Newtown Abbey driver back in the grid, and he's done a fantastic job this year and really been, had it not been for a little bit of bad luck at Rockingham mid-season, I think he certainly would have had the UK title in the bag. But yeah, he's taken him a couple of events just to get to grips with the SR8 and the different handling characteristics. But I'm sure we can expect big things from him in the future.
The pursuit of James Swift swings a little bit in favour of McLuhan. It's 1.8 seconds as now Jaap Bartels ducks into the pit lane to hand over to Stuart Moses. Now this could be interesting because of course the Spider doesn't need to refuel, And we've not seen the best of Stuart Mosley so far this weekend. Yesterday, when he emerged from the pits, all just wasn't quite right. He wasn't able to run at the pace where we'd normally expect him to be. And earlier today, unfortunately, Jaap Bartels got stranded in the gravel trap, and that meant, because he needed to be craned out, that unfortunately that was it for his participation in the race.
Well, I think we would say with Bartels' pace looking really encouraging in his first half of the race, that the car's certainly in pretty much tip-top shape for the second half, and Mosley will look to capitalise on that.
Certainly wouldn't rule out a podium, if not even a little bit better for Stuart Mosley and Jaap Bartels. Not sure quite how it's all going to play through for James Swift, except of course that with his retirements he has got a very low stationary time in the pits of just 50 seconds. So Swift, if he doesn't come into any sort of trouble, is potentially looking quite good for the victory. But it's a big if, given the way that the rest of the weekend has worked out for him. Meanwhile, here is Alex Capadia out of the pits and essentially a lap down to Bradley Ellis and Ollie Hancock, but these three are going to have a lot of fun having a scrap.
Yeah, three very, very closely matched drivers, all great friends, but undoubtedly great rivals on track as well. So, yeah, I think we're about to see an SR3 masterclass over the next couple of laps between these guys.
Well, Capadia has got every right to defend here, because having had his pit stop, it's not racing position. Bradley Ellis taking no prisoners to the inside at the chicane. And
Ollie Hancock briefly thinking, yes, I'll have some of that action as well there, but more robustly defended by Capadia.
But Ollie Hancock will have the benefit of the tow along the start and finish straight, although it's not quite as good a tow as it would be just because of the tailwind rather than the headwind. It's like a 125cc motorbike race, this. They're bobbing and weaving all over each other. And Ollie Hancock looks to pull the trigger and goes around the outside of Alex Capadia, who gets his elbows out, tries to defend. But Ollie Hancock is able to sneak past. And that was great wheel-to-wheel action, and very, very clean as well between the three of them.
Yeah, I can't see Alex standing that for too much longer. I'm sure I'll be right back up onto to Hancock's tail, and possibly this will be a precursor of things to come next weekend when this pair are out in Sepang.
Yeah, congratulations to Ollie Hancock, Alex Capadia for landing drive over in Sepang for next weekend. I was talking to Alex yesterday, and he's also stopping back, and he's booked in a race in Dubai on the way home as well. So very busy few weeks ahead for Alex Capadia, as into the pit lane now. Exactly half race distance is Paddy McLuhan to pass over to Victor Craig. Well, Stuart Mosley's chances have been somewhat harmed by the fact that he has incurred in the number 5 car a 5-second stop and go penalty.
Yeah, I think that's for a short pit stop infringement, unfortunately. So great shape for those guys. It just hasn't quite gone their way this weekend.
Very sad, as the fuel goes in to top up the McLuhan and Correa car. The question, of course, is going to be whether or not James Swift, who is often the master of fuel economy, has run the numbers and decides that actually he can do it without needing to refuel.
Yeah, and in fact, you look at his laps at the moment, he has just eased off a little bit now, lapping in the 149. So, yeah, already maybe some of that fuel conservation strategy coming into play.
Although the task has been made a lot easier by that stop and go penalty for Stuart Mosley, because otherwise I think Mosley would have been snapping in his heels.
Of course, what all these pit stops have done is elected Winslow up to second position on the road at the moment. So, yeah, ultimately, depending on what we see on their strategy as well, that Australian Giro could be the surprise factor here. Now,
also part of the factor of the pit stops is that Alex Capadia has emerged with a 29-second advantage over Marco Cencetti in the Supersport class, and that might just be enough over the next 30 minutes for Capadia to take class victory. As now into the pit lane comes James Swift, just over half distance. He will be looking to get his pit stop out of the way as he slows the car and rolls to a halt. And yes, they are going to refuel it, so Swift gets out. Fuel goes in as Victor Correa emerges from the pit lane. and that means that when Swift emerges from the pits, given that Correa has had an additional 5 seconds in the pits in comparison to James Swift, it's going to leave a little bit of an exam question for Victor Correa to try and overcome. It's going to be something in the region of a 7-second deficit, provided the pit stop goes smoothly for James Swift.
That's right, and with the exception of the aforementioned Winslow car, all the other SR8s and Spiders have now pitted. So I think within a lap or two we're going to be able to see the true pace of these guys as they run to the flag.
Winslow, I think, will be seeing into the pits pretty late on to hand over to Corbett. There is Stuart Mosley yet to have his drive-through penalty, and it really is a case of what might have been, because in fact Mosley, but for that pit infringement, would have been fed out clear of Victor Correa and could have defended it. As it is, a 5-second stop and go penalty really means that it's going to cost Stuart Mosley something in the region of 30 seconds or so, and Stuart too experienced to unnecessarily delay Victor Correa.
Yeah, Correa, of course, teammate in the recently formed Nielsen Racing paddock. And that's a team that have got great things for next year as well. I know they've already signed up to SL1 Cup entry newbies into the SL1 Cup. So already they're starting to build a future for this new team that's based right in the centre of the country. And no doubt it'll be another good, stronger year for them next year with this really strong junior lineup.
Now that is very significant that James Swift has come out of the pits a long way clear of Victor Correa. Now, in terms of the length of pit stop, it was only ever going to be 15 seconds shorter. Feels like he's got a little bit more than that over Correa. We will find out fairly soon once the order begins to stabilise. Meanwhile, here comes Johan Scheer looking to the inside of Stuart Mosley. No such favours on that occasion from Stuart, as Johan is not a teammate.
No, you would risk that Swift could well be able to match the lap times of Correa on a good day, as Scheer takes a look there and not much room for him at all as they run side by side down the hill. Looks like he's just about got the legs and held the inside line.
He is able to squirt through, but that could have been vital stuff from Stuart Mosley just to delay the Frenchman for a couple of seconds, to make the task for Victor Correa that little bit easier. So I make it that James Swift is 22 seconds clear of Victor Correa. So clearly a couple of very strong in-laps, plus a very slick pit stop for James Swift, have given him what is going to look like a very comfortable advantage.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at his previous best lap, he's somewhere in the low 48s, high 47s. So yeah, that's more than an equal of Correa's pace that he's experienced so far this year, this race weekend.
Johan Scheer in pursuit of Victor Correa, and I suspect the fight in this race is really going to be the one for second place, because it's currently in the hands of those that have pitted of Victor Correa. Then it's Johan Scheer, and they have got Ross Kaiser not all that far behind them, and Kaiser has just set the fastest lap of the race, a 1:47.3, and he comes past us once more, a 1:47.5, and he is, well, 20 seconds back from Correa. Even for Ross Kaiser, that feels like it's a little bit too much to ask for.
Yeah, now the further back down the field though, and we've still yet to see Ellis, Hancock, and Caldwell serve their pit stops in the SR3 class, and that's going to be a really big ask. It certainly hasn't worked out how we expected for Maritiotto.
And very interestingly as well, Alex Capadia has set his personal best lap of the race 0.7 of a second quicker than Marco Cenchetti's best lap of the race.
Yeah, and they've still got the Swedish duo of Enquist and Jonsson between them. So it's a big ask for Cenchetti, and he's going to have to really work hard, because at the moment it's just beyond his reach, I think.
Yeah, I think
depending on where these other two, the SR3s of Ellis and Caldwell slot back into place.
Well, there is John Caldwell being lapped by Victor Correa. In fact, that's a pass for position, because Caldwell is yet to have made his pit stop. He's going to have another couple of laps before he has to duck in. James Winslow, well, if he's on a fuel conservation run, he's doing it pretty rapidly. A 1 minute 48.145. Last time through for Winslow.
Not a huge amount of time left before the pit window closes either, so we'll see that pit stop in the next 3 minutes or so.
Over the line for Victor Correa, and then Johan Scheer, who just sets the fast lap of the race behind him, a 1 minute 47.2. Meanwhile,
Caldwell comes in to serve his pit stop, so yeah, it's really starting to hot up, isn't it?
I don't think Johan Scheer's got quite enough underneath him to reel in James Swift at the front of the field, but he certainly does to close up onto Victor Correa. Here it is then. It is, by the time it's all shaken through, probably a battle for second and third place, because it really all depends as to where James Winslow feeds out John Corbett, and then what sort of lap time John Corbett's going to be able to run at.
Yeah, Winslow's just picked up the pace again a little bit more, so he's now just done a 47.5. So yeah, as you say, of course, no. Well, ultimately, it's gonna boil down to strategy, isn't it?
Yeah, whether or not actually the team have been keeping tabs on it and decided, no, we have to put some fuel in, so go as quick as you can, James.
Of course, this is the advantage of running so late into the pit stop, is you can sort of blink second, you can see what everybody else does and respond to that.
But then again, starting from the pit lane, not doing the formation lap, etc., etc., they will have saved a little bit of fuel that way. But this is quicker than James Winslow was going earlier on. But that said, Winslow is of a level of experience where he may well have been looking through the telemetry and been saying, I can save time here, 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 and here, or save fuel here, 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 and here without sacrificing time. Meanwhile, Correa and Scheer, their battle continues. Scheer closing up onto the tail of Victor Correa by 0.3 on that last lap. But that's not going to be quite enough for Johan Scheer. There's a flurry of cars heading into the pit lane in front of us, including the race leader, James Winslow. So Winslow is into the pits, and the duration of time that's static is going to be fascinating, because these cars that we're currently watching are on the same lap as James Winslow when he hands over to John Corbett. They're about 90 seconds away. And the Jack White Racing team, unfortunately, right down at the far end of the pit lane. We can't see.
Yeah, they position themselves with a right hole shot for the exit, which is, again, quite a sort of brave and a very different strategy from everybody else, right down the far end of the pit lane. But difficult to see from here whether or not there doesn't appear to be any fuel going in.
Well, Stuart Mosley serves his drive-through penalty and comes right out of the pits into the into the path of Bradley Ellis. Bradley Ellis will have to come in at the end of this lap. Not unsurprisingly. Well, we'll find out whether or not Winslow refueled or not, because his minimum pit stop time, handing over to John Corbett, should be 75 seconds. And we will know in the next 10 seconds or so whether or not that has worked out.
Yeah, the car's now released from the pit box.
So, yes, they've not refueled. And John Corbett heads out of the pit lane. Here is Bradley Ellis, who is effectively our race leader, but needs to pit in. And that means John Corbett has indeed emerged from the pits, well clear of Victor Correa and Johan Scheer. So many different threads in this race that all are going to start coming together as we embark on the final third of the race.
Yeah, so the Jack White team have decided to risk it for a biscuit and go that full distance on. Well, this is going to be a real test of nerve for Corbett. As you say, he ran out of fuel on the very last lap of the previous race, but they were somewhat stymied by the fact that that McLuhan had to go around and take another lap. He crossed the line just before the flag went out.
Well, Stuart Mosley, post-stop-and-go penalty, is in 9th position, but is elevating his pace, as now Bradley Ellis heads towards the pits. And that is going to promote James Swift into the lead of the race. John Corbett. Well, here is James Swift, our leader. John Corbett in second place is only 10 seconds clear of Victor Correa, so Corbett can't afford to be running in the 1 minute 50-second bracket, because otherwise Correa and Shearer are both going to get the jump on him. As in the pit lane, Andy Cummings about to take over from Bradley Ellis. Be fascinating as well to see how the Super Sport class plays out, because Mark Hignett has emerged ahead of Alex Capadia. Marco Cencetti is currently 5th in the Super Sport class, so he's doing exactly what he needs to do. And in fact, Swift picks his way past Cencetti now, along the start and finish straight into turn 1. And it's going to be at the end of this lap that we will truly find out the race order. James Swift is indisputable race leader, having started at the tail of the field. His lead over John Corbett is going to be pretty significant, but John Corbett, I fear, is, despite the gamble, possibly going to find himself being shuffled down to something like 5th place by the time all is said and done, because he's only 2 seconds clear of Victor Correa, and that is a battle that's very, very close together, because they've got Johan Scheer just behind them as well. So that's the 69 car of Corbett. Bradley Ellis emerges from the pit, Andy Cummings rather, in the lead of the Super Sport class. So the real fight is probably the one for 2nd, 3rd and 4th. So that's number 69, John Corbett, who is about to be challenged, indeed passed, here he is, by Victor Correa. Corbett, gambling on not refuelling, demoted immediately to 3rd place. He's about to lose 3rd to 4th to Johan Scheer in fairly short order. There's Victor Correa in 2nd. Now, where is Johan Scheer? We'll find out in the next couple of shots. Through the chicane, and Scheer is already through past John Corbett. So John Corbett drops to 4th. Johan Scheer goes 3rd. That 4th may well become 5th, given the progress of Ross Kaiser. Well, it was worth the gamble, but it just didn't quite pay off.
No, unfortunately, I think by the nature of most of the pro drivers in this part of the race taking over 2nd, and that slightly hurt Corbett's opportunity there, really.
Now, what about the Super Sport class? It's led by Andy Cummings. He is 9 seconds up on Mark Hignett. He's 12 seconds up on Alex Capadia.
Now, at the moment, by my maths here and counting, assuming that neither of them has the fastest lap at the moment, I think that there's still just about enough points in hand for Cencetti and Maritiotto to take the title by 5 or so points, I believe.
And that is working on the basis that Andy Cummings doesn't get demoted by Mark Hignett and Alex Capadia, and I have to say that the evidence is strongly suggesting that he will be, particularly with a quarter of the race still to run. Now, what about Johan Scheer? He's in pursuit of Victor Correa, but he's not quite been able to engage Correa in battle, as John Corbett is lapped by Correa. And this is always the fun of these Radical European Masters races, is the way that some of the strategic machinations start to play through a little bit later on in the race.
Well, it shows you how closely contested the championships have been, and all of not only here in the European Masters, but also the Radical domestic SR1, the Sprint and the Enduro championships. Even within the classes, they've all come down to the final round this year. So, just shows you how well the performance balancing works.
Meanwhile, Alex Capadia is through past Mark Hignett and up into 2nd place in the Super Sport class. And Alex, who's not won yet in a Radical race this year, he's been on the podium several times, but he hasn't won one. But that could well change, because his advantage over Peter Belcher and Marco Cencetti is sufficiently large. And Cencetti, I get the feeling he's driving within himself, because his last couple of laps all been 1 minute 52s, and that indicates to me somebody who doesn't want to risk the car.
No, especially when you look that he is some 16 seconds adrift of Belshar ahead of him. So without taking any unnecessary risks, this is in the bag, particularly with the fact that Capadia is getting ever closer to Cummings, and that's going to help his cause.
And also, Hignett is also a little bit quicker than Cummings. And Andy, so the second and third we're currently watching. Andy Cummings has just come past us, a 1 minute 56.4. So actually, no, he's similar pace to Hignett.
But crucially, he's around 4 seconds a lap slower than Capadia.
And will lose those points to Alex Capadia.
Yeah, that's right. Capadia, of course, sharing with Ricardo Donor, and Ricardo's been through here for the season, so he'll be eligible for those points, and we'll be taking them off Cummings.
All of which is very good news for Maritiotto and Cencetti. Victor Correa is about to encroach on to Marco Cencetti. Here is the race leader, James Swift, and he has got a comfortable buffer over Victor Correa. It is, well, he's giving away a second a lap to Correa, but he can afford to do that because there's only time for 7 or so more laps in the race.
Yeah, currently 11.1 ahead of the young Brazilian, but yeah, he's looking pretty strong, and it seems, as you say, although he's not responding in pace, he's certainly got a big enough buffer that he pulled out in the first half.
I think it would be a slightly different story, in fact, if Johan Scheer was able to find a way past Victor Correa, because Scheer appears to have slightly more pace underneath him and could begin to harry James Swift. At the same time, I suspect that if Swift needed to dig in and find a second lap, he probably could do. Yeah,
what he has got to watch, though, is the chasing Ross Kaiser as well, who now's just a tenth adrift of Corbett, and the fastest car out there at the moment.
And Kaiser indeed already up into 4th place at the end of Sector 1. But Kaiser 2 seconds lap quicker, but 26 seconds back. Again, that is of no concern to James Swift, with just over 11 minutes remaining in the Supersport class. Alex Capadia is within a second of Andy Cummings and is about to find a way past the number 6 car. So Alex Capadia in Sector 1 at the moment. I think when he breaks our timing screen at the end of Sector 1, will be clear of Andy Cummings into the lead of the Supersport class. Another lap about to be completed for James Swift, and Swift accelerates over the line.
As we look back there, and you can see Correa still just about in contention in the distance, but yeah, as I said, the big question now is Capadia already made his way past Cummings?
He hasn't quite done it through Sector 1. He might do in Sector 2. And the progress of Pete Belshaw. Now, Marco Cencetti, is he nursing a problem? Question mark.
Yeah, last lap a 154.6, which is some 2.3 seconds slower than Belshaw ahead of him. So yeah, that's a slightly surprising drop in pace from the Italian.
Because even if Marco Cencetti was driving within himself, I'd still expect to see him in the mid 1 minute 52 second bracket.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you might even see him slightly lower than that. The the fastest pace really has been 150 dead for an SR3 around here this weekend. So yeah, that's worryingly off the pace.
Meanwhile, Capadia is now past Andy Cummings, so Alex Capadia leads the Supersport class as James Swift looks to put the lap on to Pete Belshaw. As Belshaw just outbrakes himself into turn 10. And I'm not sure he totally saw that James Swift was coming. Swift, though, able to get back past him. Puts the lap on him. And Swift now is going to be about 8 seconds clear of Correa at the end of this lap. So Cencetti is able to manage his pace. We're keeping on Marco Cencetti, of course, because here Marcello Maritiotto, if they stay where they are, will be our Supersport class champions, but they're possibly putting a slightly finer margin onto it than you'd have hoped to have seen, as now Johan Scheer lines up on Victor Correa. Scheer was a second quicker than Correa last time around, And this battle suddenly bursting into life, and clearly Shear possibly just thinking, if I drop back for a lap or two, conserve my tyres, and then push on without giving Carrera the chance to respond, that might be my best bet to get second.
Yeah, and that would be a fantastic ending to the season for this French team. Of course, that would be 3 podiums out of 3 starts. So yeah, game's really on here, and it's the first time that this pairing have been together here at this weekend.
Sadly, a case of what might have been for Stuart Mosley. He's just set his fastest lap of the race, 1 minute 49.2. But that drive-through penalty means that he is marooned in 7th place. Now, Cenchetti, 1 minute 52.5 from Cenchetti last time around.
Yeah,
clearly he's determined not to close up onto Pete Belshaw.
Yeah, that's right, just managing the pace, although Belshaw's again going a little bit slower now in the 53.5s, but interestingly it looks like there's a little bit of contact as well. There's 52 in the car we're seeing here, Correa, and one of the cars
and
further down the field, Enquist.
Well, we saw
SR3.
Henning Enquist heading into the pit lane a few laps ago, and there is exploratory work still going, looking at the rear of that car. We didn't see the contact that took place between them, but that possibly indicates there is a suspicion of some less than courteous lappery.
Yeah, so I'm sure the stewards will be taking a good look at that at the end of the race.
Now, Johan Scheer in the tow once more behind Victor Crair, and the pair of them as they battle are having an elevation of pace which is bringing them up onto terms with James Swift, but we have got 7 minutes remaining. So when Swift gets back to the line, it's going to be time for 3 more laps. And that, I don't think, is quite going to be enough for Scheer or Correa. Of course, there is the question now whether or not Brian Poulter, the race director, dispenses some Judge Dredd-style instant justice to Victor Correa.
Well, I'm just wondering if, because of if there is any contact there, that might have accounted for the ability for Scheer to catch up so quickly in that last lap.
So Johan Scheer, yeah, right up onto terms now with Victor Correa again. It's Pete Belshaw who's just clear of them. And if Correa has got any handling difficulties as a result of that contact, it's going to be in the turbulent wake behind the SR3, where he's really going to find out about it.
Yeah, and they've just caught Belshaw exactly where Correa doesn't want to, which is really this middle sector, which is the bit where the SR3 really shines.
And Belshaw moves aside. Yeah. It's very courteous driving of Pete Belshaw. So he then slots back into line, because actually Belshaw is in with a shout here, demoting Mark Hignett and getting himself onto the final rung of the Supersport class rostrum. Yeah,
not too far adrift of Hignett and Hancock. Again, Mark Hignett new to the Radical racing this year, a little bit of racing in the UK, and then his first outing here on the European stage, and he's done a fantastic job again. Really developed incredibly quickly with Ollie Hancock as his driving coach.
5 minutes and 20 seconds left in the race. James Swift across the line to complete lap 29. 6.7 seconds his lead over Victor Correa. There is Mark Hignett, who has got this fight for second and third about to depose him, and I'm sure that as soon as Swift gets the signal that Correa and Scheer are within 5 seconds of him, he will just pick up the pace again. In the Supersport class, it is Alex Quadia who leads it from Andy Cummings, then Hignett, Belshaw and Cenchetti. It's Victor Correa. Not sure that Mark Hignett knew he was there. More to the point, Hignett is just sticking to the racing line. He's going to let Correa do the hard work and find a way around him, which he does into turn 5. But I don't think that's particularly worked in advantage of Johan Scheer, who instead slides past on the exit of turn 5. They climb out of turn 7 and 8, uphill towards the daunting and formidable turn 9.
Yeah, and then you can start to see as well the sun, the real difference in light and shade on various areas of the circuit now, which is also going to make the driving conditions particularly tricky.
Certainly is, with under 4 minutes left in the race. As long as James Swift crosses the line with 3 minutes 40 or less remaining, we'll be into the penultimate lap, and it is looking as if that's going to be the case, because here is the race leader, James Swift, as he heads through the final turn. And yes, there's going to be no jeopardy about needing to do an extra lap by a second or so. James Swift starting the penultimate lap. His lead over Victor Carrere is diminishing, but is insurmountable for Carrere unless it all goes desperately wrong for James Swift, who is going to be finishing the season much as it started for him, which is with success in Spain.
Yeah, and very much the same as we saw his form here this time last year and in previous years at Barcelona. It's a circuit that he really enjoys. And he's it's almost been a sort of a case of what might have been for them this year. They've been dogged by bad luck throughout the season, but the pace has undoubtedly been there when all the elements have come together. But
meanwhile, Pete Belshaw is on to terms with Mark Hignett in the fight for the final spot on the Supersport podium. It's just using a little bit of the curb. There is Victor Carrere, who's still pushing hard to make sure he keeps Shear behind him. As the pair of them run over the low-profile curb, continuing their climb to the summit of the circuit as the wind really starting to whip up again and getting very, very breezy into the closing laps of this race. Shear getting right up behind Victor Carrere again, under braking into turn 10, but he just can't quite push his way through that turbulent air to then really challenge for the position.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even though he's been able to again lap just a shade quicker than Carrere, he just can't quite seem to make that car. I'm just wondering if he's maybe not quite as confident, not quite as experienced under the braking as Carrere. Obviously, he's had a lot of experience in the SR8, both in the UK and Europe.
Pair of them accelerating through the final turn. There is the pit signal. One more lap to go for James Swift. He's 3.3 seconds clear of Victor Carrere. At the back of the picture then, you just saw the move that was being made by Pete Belshaw on Mark Hignett. They are heading down the start and finish straight now in the fight for the final spot on the Supersport podium. There's still the battle for second and third continuing. They are closing up on to James Swift. I don't think Swift will be unduly concerned. They've also got a little bit of lappery of Andy Cummings to complete. Well, for Cummings and Ellis, I'm just thinking back to the Red Bull Ring earlier in the year, and that retirement is now proving to be very costly for them.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's really proved the turning point in the championship for them. But no, sadly couldn't do it this year. This time last year they were celebrating with the class victory, but not to be for them this year. It's gone to Marcelo and Marco if they can just make it around this final lap. And it's such a nightmare that last lap. You can hear every last creak, every vibration. It's a horrible feeling. And I'm sure he's just willing to see the checkered flag.
And now for James Swift, having had a fairly torrid weekend of it in terms of retirements, he is just a couple of corners away from ending the season on a high. Swift negotiates the chicane. He's just got one more corner to go as James Swift accelerates through. The checkered flag is ready and waiting, and he takes the win in the final round of the 2015 Radical European Masters. Second place goes to Victor Carrere and Paddy McLuhan, and third to Johan Shear and Alain Costa.
Yeah, then it's Ross Kaiser that crosses the line, just coming into shot now.
So Kaiser and Woodward, our Masters champions, they finished the season with a fourth place finish. The no fuel gamble for John Corbett, I think, is going to pay off with a fifth place finish. And certainly a very different way of doing things. But here comes Marco Cencetti to the checkered flag. Cencetti takes the flag. He and Marcello Marattiotto are the Radical European Masters Supersport champions for 2015.
And what a fairy tale finish for them as well. I mean, it's only, you look back to last year and that spectacular and unfortunately season-ending crash for Marattiotto. Really, we were all very worried for him, but he's bounced back in fantastic style, and a brace of superb drives this year have given him a very well-deserved championship title.
So the drivers acknowledging each other on the way back to the paddock. We've still got a couple of cars due to take the flag, including our Super Sport class winner, Alex Capadia, when he's finally going to get his Radical European Masters victory for this season alongside Ricardo Dona in the final race of the year. Waiting for Capadia to come out of the final turn, which he does now, and takes the checkered flag. So they're all home and across the line. Let's have a look then at the final results then. Victory for James Swift, second place for Victor Carrera and Paddy McLuhan, third for Alan Costa and Johan Scheer from fourth, Terence Woodward and Ross Kaiser. Alex Pedro and Ricardo Dona winning the Super Sport class in eighth overall, ahead of Andy Cummings and Bradley Evans. Pete Belshaw completes the podium on the last couple of laps. Marcello Martiotto and Marco Cenchetti fifth in class, and that is enough to give them the Super Sport Championship. Disappointment for Ozzy Youssef and Jean Gandar. They were early retirements from proceedings. So well done to all of our Radical European Masters champions for this year. Terence Woodward and Ross Kaiser in the Masters class, Marco Cenchetti and Marcello Martiotto in the Supersport class, and our Fangio winner, Alain Costa, who really has seen off the season on the high with a treble podium this weekend.
Yeah, fantastic, and what its season it's been. You know, we've had some, you know, enjoyed some really fantastic circuits in Jerez, you know, Silverstone, you know, over to Red Bull Ring. That was a very welcome return to that circuit in the Austrian countryside, and then of course, you know, firm favourites such as here in Monza. So it's been a really fantastic year, and I can't wait for next year. It's
been an absolutely brilliant season of racing in the Radical European Masters, and it's James Swift who has secured the win in the final race of the season, and receives the congratulations of the 360 Racing team. Handshakes and high fives all around.
I'm sure there's a mixture of 50% jubilation and 50% relief in that after the weekend that he's had. It's been a real uphill struggle.
So let's have a look back then at the highlights of this final race of the year, and it was Terence Woodward who got the jump on Paddy McLuhan in the early stages to lead into the first corner, and those couple of laps it took McLuhan to clear Woodward, in fact turning out to be critical later on in the race. The early stages were by and large pretty clean as they all scrabbled for ground. Pete Belshaw taking a trip through the gravel trap, but fortunately he was able to wind his way through and rejoin the fray, eventually to be onto the Supersport podium. Bradley Ellis, not unsurprisingly, was mixing it with some of the Masters class cars early on, as from the back of the grid James Swift was busy picking his way up through the order. Had a good scrap with 360 Racing teammate Terence Woodward, but eventually was able to sneak past Woodward and set off in pursuit of Paddy McLuhan. For too long, he forced the mistake from McLuhan, was able to ease past and into a lead which he would not relinquish. So Swift, second half of the race, carving through well clear, but all intrigue as well on the fight for the Supersport class honours, with Alex Pedro and Ricardo Dona winning the Supersport class, but Cenchetti and Maritiotto doing enough to claim the Supersport Championship. Well, John Corbett and James Winslow gambled on no refuelling, and unfortunately they just didn't quite have the pace underneath them. So it was a victory for James Swift, second place to Victor Carrera and Paddy McLuhan, third to Johan Scheer and Alain Costa, Alex Capadia and Ricardo Dona winning in the Supersport class. So that is it from Barcelona, from Will Brown and Ben Evans. Thank you very much for joining us for this season of Radical European Masters Racing. We'll look forward to more of the same in 2016.